Okay. So this afternoon we're going to listen to Derris Woods. Derris has a long career in education, from teaching languages in local high schools, English overseas, and most recently teaching English in an ELICOS program. Also, Darius is a Doctor of Philosophy in Research, which he gained from UTAS in 2009. Is that correct, Darius?
That's right. Yes, it only seems like yesterday, but 10 years.
So this afternoon, Darius will provide us with some of her experiences, her findings, and her reflections in the area of teaching English as an additional language. So, Darius, if you could start sharing your screen, we'll make a start. And if I could just ask everyone to turn their microphones off as well.
You won't give it to me.
Yeah, I'm just making you a co-host now, Darius, and you should be able to see that share screen button.
I've got the green button, but it won't let me in. Share screen now. Can I do it now or no?
Yep, you should be able to do it now.
Ah, good. Now I've got to find my, there it is, right in the middle. My PowerPoint. I'd lost it.
Excellent. You can see that, Darius, so when you're ready.
Okay. So thank you all for turning up. 16 is a good number when it's only one day away from your Easter break. Yes, so you're lucky to catch me this week, because next Friday week, I will be unemployed. The COVID-19 has taken 12 months to hit my job, and there aren't enough people in the Hobart area for it. They have moved into a new complex in Melbourne, and they're going to teach university English, but I think some people from Hobart will be able to work from that campus in Lonsdale Street, but they'll have to do it online, and not many people like the online learning. I've been doing it for 12 months with occasional visits into the office, but it is much better being face-to-face, I find. You still can get through it, but it takes much longer. So just some background that's been given to you about my training. I did primary and secondary training. I didn't get much primary. I got a lot of secondary high school, and I did the last 8 years at the senior secondary high school, Helier College in Burnie. And over the years, they found out that I had to learn some foreign languages at high school, French and German. So when the plea came out for Asian languages, I took up Japanese just on my own initiative, because I was fascinated by all the characters. But then they made me learn Indonesian as well. So very reluctantly, I became a foreign language teacher. But when this job came up, I was partly retired. I didn't really like retirement. And I thought a part-time job would be just really, really good. So it's lasted 2.5 years. A lot of it's been online, and a lot of it has been more difficult because I have to wait for people to come from work, and I'm testing at 9 o'clock on a Sunday night, which is quite, it's okay for me because I live alone, but it wouldn't have suited someone married with children and trying to get them to bed. The students I've had 50% Chinese. Everyone thinks I'm only teaching Chinese, but I'm amazed at the people who've come from other countries. Colombia, I've had a couple, Brazil one, Mexico one, Taiwan a couple, Chile one, Malaysia several. They range from an age of 18 to 45. The 18 and 19-year-olds that come out they find it very difficult, because they've never had to do any subjects on their own. It's all been put on boards in their country, and they just have to learn it by rote. So I found it was very, very difficult with some of them. They were too young. Most of the ones I've had this year are about 25 to 35, and they've already got degrees, which has made it easier. But when it comes to learning English, they've had it very much like it's on the blackboard, learn it, and come back to the exam and just repeat it. So I've had to do a lot of conversation with them, and to brush up on various points which they don't know. So when I was doing the English currency last year, I realised that these students have very few skills really about learning in the way the Australian people learn. We were always made to give activities and explain a lot more, ask the children to explain. Chalk and chalk was not accepted. Up 10 years ago, you had to have a lot of activities. And my daughter is a teacher now, and she has a lot of activities. The straightforward teaching from the blackboard doesn't always happen now. These students were very, very upset by the fact that I was not showing them all the time. And I found when they wanted to write an essay, I had to give them some ideas about how to do it. So I've had lots of interesting situations to deal with, but I found them wonderful to teach. There's only one or two I'll tell you about who've come back and really had an argument with me. Other than that, they've been delightful. So I will miss them and the conversations we've had. Now, at the end of my English currency last year, it took me 3 months and 15,000 words. I really needed one burden myself, so thank you for coming. At the end, it said that every EAL or TESOL, what I can call it, interaction should always start with a puzzle. So here's your puzzle. How was the statement that was said to me in Japan? We love shoe cream. An example of being lost, something being lost in translation. So I'll leave you with that. At the end, I'll tell you the answer. You might be able to work out what they really meant. They kept telling me they love shoe cream, and shoe cream to me was something you put on your shoes and polished it. So I was wondering what on earth it could be. And so don't say anything until the end. The first thing I learned in my study last year was that speech pathologists were very, very expert on how to form letters and how to help with any speech problems. And I was lucky that I was working for charity at that time. I was working with a group called the Korean English Church. And I'd go in once a week and give my English assistance to all the students there. It had to stop in the last year because I've been at home and not allowed to move out. But I found that some of the things the lady took, she gave us 2 seminars, this lady. I'm not allowed to use her name because I haven't asked her permission. But she does do a lot of work in Hobart in the prison, and she's helping prisoners become more literate so that they can leave the prison and go out and find a job. So this speech pathologist was very helpful in teaching us how to use our tongue, our lips, our mouth, our teeth and palate. And later on, I used to be touching my face and feeling my cheekbones and my jawbone. And I found that she gave us some excellent ideas. I only took down the 2 letters that I only put down for you the 2 letters that I needed for my children, my students. I shouldn't call them children. The letter R was the one they couldn't say. They couldn't say rabbit and really. And so I remembered my French lessons when I was told to keep my tongue in the middle of my mouth and let it quiver. They have a very rolled R. Sometimes I can do it, like the Hirondale. It's not really good. It's better than it was, though. And I was told how to do that. But she told us a better way to say the letter R in the English way. And you can try it like while you're sitting in your own family rooms or classrooms. You have to take the tip of your tongue on the bottom of your teeth and roll it back against your palate. And then you'll breathe out. And it does work. It does come out to an R. So you can try that in your own time or now while I'm talking. The letter V was another one they had a lot of trouble with. And I went to the mirror and found out how I did V. All I do is put the 2 lips together and leave a little hole in the middle, and out will come the breath, and it's a V. But the speech pathologist told us a different way. It's really ugly to do. So you have to get in front of a mirror when no one else can see you. You have to put your top teeth over your bottom lip, down halfway down to your jaw, down to your chin. And then you'll be able to say the letter V if you breathe out. I can still hear it, but I still prefer to do the 2 lips together. Then she said that some words like Woolworths are very difficult, and we're best to change them into 2 words that they can say, like Worldworth. It does sound a little bit like Woolworths, but I think I prefer trying to get it better. Lawyer was an interesting one. She said, just say lawyer. And then gradually they'll move to lawyer, but it doesn't really sound right to me. The one I liked best was usually. We always say usually. She said, if you listen to English speakers, it's always usually. So I found that those ideas were very useful for my students. And one boy wrote me a reference about how I'd made him say the last letter in the word, like 3 o'clock became 3 o'clock. and he said he now uses the hands on his face to try and perfect the sound. He can feel his face vibrating. So you're allowed to ask some questions at the end of each slide. What do you think about that one? Any questions?
Yes, if you've got a question for Derris at the end of each section, just call out or put your hand up.
No questions? You might have had different methods.
Gillian's got a hand raised, Derris.
Okay, Gillian, what would you like to know?
Hi, Derris. So it's not actually a question about the content of the slide, but I wonder if you could click on slide view to make it bigger for us.
You want it bigger? Yes, I was told about that yesterday, so I better do that now. I know how to do that.
Whoa.
That bigger? Bigger? Otherwise it disappears.
No, that's enough. Thank you.
Right? Anyone else with a question or a piece of advice? No. So we'll leave that and go. You have your own methods of doing the pronunciation, but it's good if you can find a speech pathologist. They work in it all the time. So the next one, I started to have to look at the way I was taking lessons, and because my students were very good at their degree, but they knew nothing about the world, and they knew nothing much about history or geography. One class I had, there were 2 students in it, and I asked them to name 2 countries around the borders of China, and they couldn't do it. Later on, I could name 2 just off the head, but I went off with a teacher later with an atlas, and we found 14 countries have a little slice of, or a big slice of the Chinese border. So I went to look. I realised that my throat was very sore at the end of the lesson, and I was feeling very tired, and I thought there must be another way. I must be doing something incorrectly. And so I found this very good article by a lady called Maya Reza Koditsky. She's an American librarian. She must have had a teaching background, I think, written in 2019, so it's quite recent. She advised in her article that teacher talk time should be only 20%. And this gives students the need to search their memories, to keep the conversation going. She used the word stretched. And I've heard that a lot in teaching. We have to stretch a class. So it also applies to TESOL. And then they become more confident. And I've got a girl now, I met her once face to face, and she's so much happier to try and find the words, and her conversation is becoming much more fluent. So how do we do this? The author said, well, you can use open-ended questions and don't answer them yourself. Wait till they answer. So here are some that I've used. They've worked very well. Can anyone say any more about this? We might be talking about global warming, which is quite scientific, and they don't know much about it. It's amazing how much they can start referring to their own country about it. Can anyone build on this? Do you agree? Sometimes you'll get a different opinion, and they're very happy to be friendly with each other but have a different opinion. Is this right? How do we know that this is right? So I did some trials. I thought of a problem. I think it might have been, what sort of food do you have at your festivals in China? It was a Chinese girl. And she would hardly speak. I had to keep prompting her and asking for, where do you have this party? What kind of food do you have? Who comes to this party? I think it was the Spring Festival. Then I tried it with, I knew then that I was talking too much. So I went to student 1, student 2 and student 3 and put them together online. They could see each other in the photo, but they didn't know each other well. And I asked them to discuss the same thing. It was amazing. I may as well not have been there. I hardly spoke at all. Once I prompted a question like, can you say anything more about this? Do you agree? How do you know that? I hardly had to interrupt at all. They carried on with the conversation as if they were native speakers. So that's one thing I've learned I'd like to pass on. So have anyone got anything to say about that methodology? Whether you used it or would like to use it? Any hands going up?
Not at the moment, Derris.
No hands. So everyone's in agreement that 20% is good.
I was just going to say it's always a lesson that we can learn and do more of. It's so easy. You know it, but it's easy to forget.
Yes, it is. I have to keep telling myself, stop, let them speak. And it does work. and my throat is much better because I'm not doing most of the work. If it's a new student, you have to do a lot with them, but after that, the second lesson, it's like they've been speaking English for quite a while. Then I had to look at reading, and I found out that TESOL students, or anyone learning a foreign language, should be exposed to a lot of material. I found the Ellicott reading is very good, but it's mainly all the information and all the personal details are in the book. You very rarely have to plan a lesson, it's all done for you. But you do, I did find that some of them wanted to learn more and asked me for academic pieces of paper or academic books so that they could improve, so they could go to university. And I found that they find it very difficult to have any comprehension of anything that's not a literal piece of writing. And the reading I got said you must give them a wide selection of books, and that's what I wrote when it said, how will you use this in your classroom? I said they needed many more kinds of books. We need a little mini library in the type of teaching I do, because they're adults and they want to know a lot about a lot of things. So they even mentioned brochures. I've got books, magazines, reading material. I did find a set of lovely Australian stories based on Aboriginal history, and they were delightful, but they found them very difficult, even though the language is very simple and the plot is very simple. You have animals and snakes talking to each other, and think people going into caves, they think of them as people, but they're really animals, and they can't see the connotation with human conversation. So I had to go through one page by one page to explain what the problem was and how the animal had fixed the problem. So I found too, one girl asked me for more academic pieces of writing, short stories. She found the short stories very difficult. It had a picture of a castle falling to pieces, but she felt that the man had died, but he was really having a dream about being taken into this castle and then being led up a staircase which led to the outside. I found she was very upset about that. I didn't even try poetry with her, so difficult. One of the trainers is trying to write poetry, and I've been correcting his poetry, and he's from Bangladesh, and he is quite surprised with what we can do with it when you know your native language. So in Hobart, there's a big conversation going on now about phonics versus the whole word approach. I was taught, thank heaven, by the phonic method, and I just wondered if you had any thoughts about that. Apparently there's been a seminar or a forum about dyslexia. The literature I read said it doesn't suit dyslexic people. They can't just learn by word alone, they have to have the sounds. So anyone a comment here? No, everyone's happy about
I could make a comment.
Okay.
Just to say that I'm doing some EAL support in some quite early classrooms for early years, even a prep classroom.
Right.
And there's a really heavy push to do this synthetics phonics where the books really don't make much sense at all, you know, very restricted vocabulary. And
Right.
I think there's a place for them, but really you've got to be reading them, you know, quality literature as well that have actual stories, you know,
Yeah.
like you're saying, Derris, they've got to have stories, simple stories that make sense, that are good stories, you know, written by well-known authors, rather than these pat sat and pat sat fat, you know, that's...
Oh, it's very, very just formal English. It really isn't telling a story.
Yeah, anyway, that's my comment.
Right, what about the dyslexia? Any of you have problems with dyslexic children? I haven't had to do anything like that, but I can imagine it would be a training in itself, I think, to do that. We've done the reading, we'll go to the next one. COVID has stopped a lot of these ideas coming through, because I was online, you can't have a lot of books and brochures and so forth. Speaking, apparently to speak properly you read a great deal of oral and verbal skills. Apparently you have to have a great deal of knowledge, because you can't actually work on, I think I've lost the statistics on this, I'll just have a look. I wanted listening. I wanted to do speaking.
I think you missed a couple of slides, Derris.
No, I haven't. I don't think so.
Oh.
I might have done. Just hold on. I'll go back. Because reading. Oh, writing, yes. They don't. Yes. I'll do the keep the speaking one, and then I'll tell you how they have to have the right vocabulary. I had a 35-year-old nurse. He was a pharmacist, but he wasn't allowed to practice his pharmacy, and he was back. I've gone to the right one. Speaking, here we are. He was made to do another science subject, so he was doing nursing. But he had to come in to me, who's doing the advanced book, and he had to talk about depression. And his comment was, no one in India has depression. I said, come on, I've read a lot about Indian women. They're suddenly alone at 50 and they aren't very depressed. And he then said he had heard about that, but he said it's getting worse, that there will be more. But he then had to go through 16 items to discuss with me why depression, or how depression could be fixed or alleviated. And he could only find 4 things that Indians had to do. One was Tai Chi, and joining a club, it might have been another one. Walking, I'm not sure what the 4th one was. But he had a very difficult time. He didn't always know the topic, and he didn't know how to do it. And I found with speaking that you're better to work with a group, a pair. Some teachers like the children just to have the natural way of learning. They want to just say, let's have a talk about the weekend. But they really need the vocabulary to go with the weekend. You just can't expect them to chatter because they don't have the words. The communicative approach is good, where you have pairs working together. And if you make people speak on their own, they're very frightened of making a grammar mistake. That's why it's better to work in pairs. The best thing I've seen is when they make a cake. I did that with another charity group, refugees, and they were asked to make things and do things, and they worked well together even though they had limited English. So have you had any experience in this sort of field that you could talk about? No one had to work on with refugees. I was told there are some refugees around having lessons on the vocabulary. So I just find out which one I've missed. I haven't done the writing one, I don't think. I did the reading, yes, but do the writing one. Actually, I didn't do a lot of research. I did a lot of research on how you can choose or ask children to write. They've got to skim and scan and make rough drafts and learn about extending sentences, etc., etc. But I was very interested, the day I was researching things about writing, I actually found on the ABC radio in a segment called The Mix that they were having the author, Christos Zikos, there to talk about his book, The Slap. And he's also had 8 other books published. They're not all novels, some are short stories and editorial articles. But I do remember The Slap of 2008 it was written, but he was put into a very long series, or very important series, about the people that were involved in this slap, where a boy was slapped at a party, and not by his own father, by another father. He made the comment that when you're making or asking people to write, that you should have the idea that it's a very raw moment. He said his first efforts, he went back to his first copy of The Slap, and he said it was dreadful. So it made me realise that we probably think that we should have better foreign students and that they should be better at writing. So I think I've become much more tolerant about what is being attempted. And then I slowly moved to more improved examples. I'm surprised that they're so good at their degrees, but they're very technical type of degrees. They're either accounting, where they're doing a lot of mathematics, or they're technical, they're IT people. So you don't have very many people coming through my program where they have a literary background. So I've become much more tolerant about what they can write. I do ask them to write me homework, And a lot of them say, can you help me with my writing? But I find they're not very good at doing homework and because it's it's not in the book and they don't have to do it. So I'm very worried that things won't be done. So I don't ever ask for the homework. If they send it to me by email, I'll mark it. So I'm very surprised that the students are less proficient. So anyone, some comments about how proficient people are? Anyone like to ask anything there? I'll just take a second and get a drink of water, if you don't mind.
If anyone's got anything they'd like to raise or discuss, please do so.
One of the things I like to do with my students, because writing is one of those things that they need instant feedback on, is to use the readability statistics in Word. So if they're word processing a doc, they can use the readability statistics to assess the standard and the proficiency of their writing. And that feedback has really supported my students to particularly use more complex sentence structures and paragraph structures and longer noun groups, which is, you know, what I'm searching for at my level.
What level is this?
B2.
B2 is what age group are you teaching?
Oh, adult.
Adults, oh, that's right. Yes,
Is that feature of Word, is that just a normal feature of Word?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. It's you've got to turn it on.
Yep.
But yeah, it's brilliant.
Okay. Thank you.
Very effective with students.
Derris, can I just ask, in your slide you talk about moving slowly to more improved examples. Do you have a sort of particular methodology of doing that?
Well, for my primary school teaching, we used to start off with a simple sentence, and then we'd, you know, the dog ate the bone, but then it'd be the big dog, and then the big brown dog, and we went on and jumped over a rough log or an old log or a wooden or something. What could I have? A new log or something like that. We'd extend, and then we'd say, well, what happened? Why was the dog running? And he was going somewhere. There were 7 steps. I didn't write them down, but I know that I've practiced them. You'd get them to write a story of what's going to happen to the dog, who's after the dog. And so you go generally through that. Most of my writing has been academic writing, and you have to find all the categories, and you have to join everything together. So if there's a lot of things about food, you write all that in one paragraph. A lot of things about holidays, you'd write all that, or a lot of things about sport. You have to keep a paragraph to each topic. In the PhD, it was 531 paragraphs, but some of them were the same thing, but some were recognised in words and some were just in numbers. So there was a statistic to go with each of them. But I had 1,000 pages of information from the girls in the study, and that had to be divided. I think there was 353 categories of things they talked about. So that's for higher grades. But when I did a lot of relief teaching, and they gave me kindergarten and grade 1 and 2. I said, help, help, help. I found that some of the activities I had could be modelled, and they liked play acting and telling stories, and then we'd try and we'd draw a picture and then try to write a sentence about it. And I found that even that was not allowed towards the end of my relief teaching. You had to just let them, you could put a word down, that's all. I was at the park, so they just wrote park. Some of the more adventurous ones would write, I went to the park. I remember my own teaching was just done in stages. You learnt sentences and then paragraphs and then a story.
Yeah, I suppose, Derris, sorry to interrupt.
All right, go ahead.
I suppose I was kind of thinking of high school students and adults, you know, who it's a little bit harder to work at that level because often they're trying to, you know, do academic work and, you know, whereas when you're building it from kinder or prep, you can work at that very basic level and it can be an incremental thing. But, you know, in terms of when someone comes to you and they're trying to do an academic piece of writing, if you had any magic bullet there.
Well, I've done 3 theses and they've all been in, I've always had to categorise everything. And so what went, you know, bananas went bananas and apples with apples. In the PhD, I remember there was one I particularly was interested in was how they felt about their parents. So I had 4 categories. I loved my mother, I hated my mother. I loved my father, I hated my father. And actually one of them came, one of the significant findings that girls find, teenage girls, adolescent girls find their fathers very difficult to deal with. And so my father was always working away from home, so I didn't have that problem, but he was very strict. So I kept very short on the straight and narrow path. But no, I found the only way that I've been able to do it is to teach them what comes first. I taught a lot of social science and, you know, what were the 5 reasons the war began? And it might be that the king died. So, and there was a battle over who became the king. And the king didn't like the next country, so they went to war. And so that would be all underneath the heading of the king. So everything I've always done has always been in, every paragraph has to relate to one particular topic. You can have 2 paragraphs on it or 3, you can make it, but you have to keep breaking it up. It becomes too long-winded. So I think you have to probably go through your students' essays and just see what flow they have, what they're talking about first, what comes second, what comes third, and see if it's all on track. Some of them like to put it all in the first paragraph, or actually the first paragraph should have all the categories in it. And then you take category 1 and talk about that. So the second paragraph is category 1, the third one is category 2. A lot of children find that hard. They don't like having the, what do I call it, the introductory paragraph, where you say, I'm going to talk about 5 things and the war began because of this and that, and then something else happened, and then the main cause was because someone else died and they decided to take the next country or something like that. A lot of them were about wars. Is that helpful? You've really got to itemise each particular paragraph and see what they're trying to do.
Thanks, Derris.
I think if you read the whole essay and then break it down into parts, you'll see that some of the parts are not all together.
And something else you might want to keep in mind is I had an interesting conversation just last week with a group of Taiwanese students.
Yeah.
They're all university graduates.
Right.
And when they were at school, they were taught sentence patterns, and just basically in Mandarin, they plug the word into the pattern. And so I've been teaching, for those who don't know me, I'm really old-fashioned. So I've been teaching you adverb plus subject plus adverb plus verb plus, you know, blah, blah, blah patterns.
Yeah.
And they're like, can you give us all the English patterns? Because then we know where to plug things. And it's just like learning Mandarin at school. And I'm like, so what?
Mm. They don't have these and A's. It's very much a code like.
But, you know, but they know their patterns. All these people are university graduates. So they've got great analytical skills. So I'm giving them the patterns, and it is really making a difference in their sentence structures.
That's good.
So, you know, and I've been teaching TESOL for a long, long time.
Right.
And it's the first time Taiwanese students have told me this. So sometimes it's worth just checking, you know, what skill set they have, because, you know, I am now seeing a group of students sit down with sentence patterns on a piece of paper, and they're constructing sentence based off those patterns. Whereas the rest of my class, which has interrupted and minimalist education, so they haven't graduated primary school, of course, don't have the analytical skills to use that strategy. So there you need something else. But it's interesting looking at what skills people hold.
Yes, that is one method I did read about, where you give them a sample and they write to the sample, but it wasn't considered the best method. But I think in your case, it probably is the best method. You've got to go with what the students know and work from there. If they've got those patterns, you can then improve on the sentence. At least they've got a sentence in their mind, and you can improve on it. But the best way is to give them a topic and show them. I did see a video on it where a man, I think, I'm not being sexist, but it was very masculine, wouldn't appeal to me, but he brought out in his English as a second language class all these metal rods, and some were small and some were medium and some were long. And so the small ones all had to be grouped together and the medium ones all grouped together and the third one grouped together. So the first ones were the 4 reasons why something happened. With global warming, I think. They had to write on what is causing climate change. So the first, he described, you know, having the 4 small pieces of steel. That was the beginning. And then the second part, you took each part medium size and talked about what that was. And then you concluded and brought all the pieces together and said the best one was, you know, point X or Y or whatever. So he was doing it in that sort of pattern that I had to do. You put everything together and say what you're going to talk about. Then the second thing, and then you go through all the body of the essay, and then you conclude it. But I like the idea of these people having patterns, because they have to have something to work from, and they're good for you to work from them because you can then improve them. Or is that correct? Can you improve them, or will they improve them? She's not answering. So I don't know.
Sorry, I was just getting off mute. I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure I understood your question, because I'm not looking at the genre level of the whole text. I'm looking at sentence structure.
Just sentences. It's that I would be happy if they came. Well, a lot of them do come with some writing when I'm in the classroom with them, and I can see how I can improve it. I'll say, well, that's not quite an English sentence, but you're close. I give them some, you know, compliment for having written a good sentence. But sometimes I find mine leave out the A's and the V's, and they do seem to know what a basic English sentence is.
Yeah, I was looking mainly at word order.
Oh, the word order. Yes, I was telling somebody asked me the other day how I've learned 5 languages, and I said I can only do it if I've got a good English sentence in my head, like the quick brown fox jumped over the big log. And that is in my head. That's, I can remember being taught that in that grade 3, and, you know, learning that quick was an adjective and all the rest of it. But then I put all the other sentences on top. Indonesian is very much a code. You don't have to have all those words in. Japanese is very similar, but they put the verb at the end. You have to wait a long time. German, partly in the past tense, the verb comes at the end. The other one, German, we're very Germanic. And so our language is based on German grammar, but they have some of their verbs go to the end. But they do things in, like, you have a subject and then you have an adjective to describe it, you have a verb, and then you have an adverb to describe the verb, and then you have some action happening. So I do have a template. When I learn a new language, I put it all over the template of English. And then that helps me with the word order. I know that I have to change some around and do some differently. But I don't think I would have been very good at learning other languages if I hadn't had that word order. So I really like the idea of the patterns. They're not considered very good in the theory I read. They're the worst ones, but I think they're better than nothing. If you're going to start with something, use what they have and then move forward from it. Anyone else got a comment? No? So
I think we can move
go
on.
back on to that later on. Do you want to? Very interesting how people say things differently. Don't want that one. I want the listening one. Listening is, this is the best one I did. The listening research opened up a really different approach for me. It made me do some very informative changes to my teaching. I had never thought that listening to someone was really a psychological exercise. You really do have to help the speaker, according to this article. And you must engage with the speaker in very subtle ways, much more than I'd imagined. I came from a country background. I didn't ever live on a farm, but my father was a farmer. And I used to go to the farm once a week and run around. And I used to hear the men telling stories. They were always telling stories. And later on, people tell me that I'm full of stories from my overseas trips. So I wondered why quite often people would say, look, I must go now. I can't stay. Or, oh, my taxi's arrived. You know, they would stop my stories and move on. But that's very bad manners. You really should give people feedback when they're telling a story. You've got to keep us on track. So that could be a facial expression. You could screw your nose up when you said, you know, they said I had to eat, I don't know, snails. In France, I was offered snails, and I didn't eat them then. I ate them later on in Australia. But just screwing your face up can give you a bit of a laugh for everybody. Sometimes it can be just nodding your head. I often try to do that when I'm listening to someone. The other thing I find is that you can give a quick question. They might have said, oh, I've just been to Beijing. I'd say, what were your impressions of the city, very quickly, and then they'll stop and tell you a bit more. And so I decided to experiment with this idea of giving little clues. They couldn't give me any facial expressions because that was all turned off. But I was telling them about a lengthy story of my trip to Japan to teach English. I think I left, I'm not sure if I left Launceston or Burnie or Hobart, but I left Tasmania at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I didn't arrive in Tokyo until 10 o'clock that night. I had to stop over somewhere, probably in Singapore. And then I had to catch another plane at 11 o'clock down to Kyushu, which is the bottom island of the 4 major islands in Japan. And I arrived there at midnight. Fortunately, I had half an hour's sleep on that flight. I arrived at midnight. I realised, I looked up the time difference. It was really only 9 o'clock in Japan, and there was a whole contingent of teachers and people there to welcome me. And they introduced me to my host family. And then I had to go to the home, and they had prepared a full dinner, several courses. So I was still, it was midnight Australia for me. I'd been awake since about 6 o'clock. I'd had the half an hour sleep, but they served me, it was only 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock then, in Japanese time, they served me this full dinner. And the host lady was a very nice lady, and she said, I think you can't eat much of this. And I said, no, can we eat it tomorrow? So I think I got to bed about 4 o'clock. No, I got to bed at 3, and 3 o'clock Australian time, no, Japanese time. And I had to wake up again at 7, and I was taken off to the school at 8 o'clock the next day. So I was telling this story, and I told the children that they were allowed to actually break in and help me keep going. I did tell them to give me a minute and then break in, and then another minute and then break in. And then I let them choose when they wanted to break in. And I've never had such a wonderful activity. They did, the first 2 who were preempted to make these questions, they said, oh, really, or how bad, or something like that. But then towards, you know, in the middle, one said, why on earth were you going to Japan? You haven't told us that. So I had to tell them I was going to teach English. And then from then on, they would wait a few seconds or a minute or 2, and then they'd ask a question, and it was quite genuine. They weren't doing it because I told them. So I found out that this method does work if you really listen to people. You are helping them psychologically. I felt quite happy by the time I finished the story. So I found in all the listening skills I've been researching, the task-based one is the best because it develops all the skills, spoken, written, visual and listening, whereas the communicative is only just the speaking. The natural one is not liked so much because they don't have a background of words and vocabulary. So would anyone like to comment on listening? Oh, someone's got a phone call.
Darius, could you just give a little bit more information on what you mean by task-based there?
Task-based is cooking or doing something like that. Cooking or making something. Even that one that the video I saw on making an essay, they had these steel rods and they had to put them all together in a format to make an essay. So that was a task. Been given task. Yes, I had to go to a tea ceremony in Japan, and I had to perform taking the cup and turning it twice and taking 1 sip and then turning it again. You have to drink a cup in three ways. You've got a quick sip, a long sip, and then the final sip. You're only allowed to take the basin up to your mouth 3 times. So we all had to practice that in front of one another. So it was probably a single thing we were doing, but we had to follow each other and see if we're doing it well. But cooking, I love cooking, so I've often cooked with class in Japanese classes I had in Burnie. We cooked a lot of tempura and other things, mainly tempura. We did some sushi, I think, at one stage, but mainly tempura was tempura was the best thing that we did. They worked together. I had 12 students and they worked together very well, and they put it on. We fed 300 people. So that was we had to stop and start and make new ingredients, but we certainly went for about 3 hours. Even people from the local community was coming in. Another one we did too was having primary school children in, or infant school children. We taught them how to do the characters, and the student had to actually do the painting, but then the children had to follow and do the painting. So they were working together to make some words in Japanese. But I think there were some other things mentioned too, making something together, having material to make things, making postcards, all sorts of things. Does that help you with tasks? Is that okay? Anyone, the lady who asked about tasks, is that what you wanted?
I'm sorry, Derris, I'm just having trouble with the mute button momentarily.
Oh.
Thank you.
Good. I've done writing. Have I done writing?
Yep, you've done writing, listening,
and I've done listening. Vocabulary, I haven't done vocabulary yet. So an Oxford Oxford University study in 2008, that there was a very low level of vocabulary amongst all students in schools. Apparently high school students, for those who are teaching high school, you need 3,000 new words per year. But I'm just wondering whether the text knowledge is taken over. Anyone like to comment now about how text is interrupting writing and listening and speaking? I find it's terrible. They try to write with text vocabulary and emails. I mean, text messages on my phone are dreadful. Even I work with a lot of foreigners and traders, but they all text me with this RU, R and a U, and it apparently has taken a lot of expertise away from vocabulary learning.
Derris, it's Gillian. I teach young migrants,
How old are
18 to 25, and they're very tech savvy with their phones, but I am finding that that seems to be dying off again, and they're about 5 years ago maybe it was around a lot, but I think that all those text shortcuts seem to be dying out again, but that's just my experience.
They're going out of fashion, are they? I didn't quite understand. Are they going out of fashion?
Yeah, so all of those text abbreviations seem to have stopped.
All right, so it's only just my trainer colleagues that are doing it, so I have to tell them to stop it. I think I learned about 10. At one stage at Hellyer College, they had trouble with children who were refusing English and maths, and how could they get through to them, particularly in English, to write and to have some sort of unit of work where they could use it. And they found, a couple of teachers researched this, and they found that if they gave their class text messages and let them write to each other in text messages, they were much happier about learning English. So it sounds right, really. You have to go to the poor standard to get the good standard. But unfortunately, we're overrun with technology, and a lot of the things we learned when we were young have gone, and being practical and doing things in the old way can't be done. So if you've got children who are school refusers, you have to use different methods. So I did find that I find that a lot of my students that I have tell me that one thing I do for them is I give them a lot of vocabulary. And I'm not aware of that. I just think we've got a topic. We're doing shopping and all the words are in the book. I've got to explain, hanging out with friends and meeting up with for coffee and things like that. With all these phrases you have to teach. So they don't ever write to me in text messages. they write properly. But when they do write to me at night as a text, it's in perfect English, but they do try to say the words totally. They don't say you for you, they write you. And so they are a bit of a mixture, I find. But we're living in a different world. I feel quite out of place with it, really, but I've got 3 computers around me at the moment, and I've been teaching all morning with computers, but it's certainly not as easy as being up front and having the communication with each other. Yes, I've got down the one way to learn new vocabulary is by using categorization. One of the books I have had an exercise in it where there were all these items. There were mainly beauty products for girls, perfumes and lipsticks and necklaces and things like that, rings and so forth, but they had to remember them. And later on they said, can we have some more of these? So I brought along all my cooking gadgets and spoons, and the thing that really tricked them was a grater, a cheese grater. There's probably something much better than that. My daughter said she's got a much better thing than a grater, but I like my grater. It does my cheese very nicely. But they had to learn lots of things. So the next week I went around the house with all the gardening tools, and then I went around the house for things that don't fit into any count, just miscellaneous things. I had something from California, which is a bottle opener, but it's called a fosser. And they immediately saw that it was a wine opener, though. They knew that one. They didn't know its name. One thing I did read in the theory is we should bring into the classroom things to do with their own country, that they do get very homesick and they like to see things that are from their own experience. So I was born in the year of the dragon, and I'm not telling you which one, but that's why I put the dragon down on the bottom for you. I have a lovely glass model of one sitting up on one of the cupboards I can see. And I didn't like to break it getting it down, so you're getting a picture of a dragon. But I don't think I've had a chance to take anything in now because my classes are all online. But one thing you can do when you're doing vocabulary is bring in something they know and something they love. A model. In my entrance to my house, I've got a kimono. I brought that when I came back from Japan. So my children talk about my Asian experience, but it's certainly a very beautiful piece of clothing to have, and it reminds me of my time in Japan. But this article, or this research suggested that we actually honour their countries and do something for them that way. So I think I've just about been through. I haven't done the grammar one yet. Here I had a very bad problem with one girl called Jasmine. I was trying to teach them that we had to learn the past simple. So they gave me some sentences. I played tennis, I looked at a film, and I cooked a cake. But I asked them to tell me what the endings were. When I was learning German and French, if you've done any of that, you know there are a lot of endings you have to learn for every tense, and every person, every pronoun has a different ending. And so I said I thought I'd do that rather than try and be deductive or inductive. And so I asked them to look for the endings, because the past simple only has some endings the same, but then they have all those irregular endings, and they're in the back of their book. I hadn't told them about them. Anyway, one girl said, "What do you mean by the endings?" I said, "I'm looking for some letters." She said, "I don't understand you." She said, "What are letters?" I said, "Well, they're part of the alphabet." And she said, "I don't know why you're teaching me like this. Why don't you just tell me?" And she was getting quite irate. And I said, "Oh, I'm trying a new method with you. I'm trying to get you to teach yourself." "I don't know what you mean," she said, and she got really angry. And she said, "What do you mean by letters? Tell me, what do you mean?" And I said, "Don't get upset." I said, "Try and have a look at the end of the word. Of each of those words, they've got the same letters." And the other two were keeping quiet because they didn't want to get into the argument, I think. And I could see she was nearly screaming, "Why don't you just teach me?" And I said, "Well, I will." I could see that she was going to cry. I could hear the crying in her voice, so I just said, "I'm looking for an E and a D, ED. We'll give you some past tense, simple past tense words." But I said, when they're irregular, you've got a whole page at the back of the book to learn. And a lot of them knew swim, swam, swum, and ring, rang, rung. They had that in China. So when she saw that, she was a bit better. But the next day, I just asked for examples and she was able to do it. So then I was able to go on with I am playing, I am looking, I am cooking, and do the past, present, actually the present continuous then. And I think I might have done it past. I was looking and I was playing and I was cooking a cake. And she would say, much better the second day. I said, what are you looking for this time? She said, oh, it's ing. So that was a clue that the ending was different when it was a continuous tense. But we don't do a lot of grammar. You can go for 2 or 3 for a week and not do grammar. A lot of the book I do is just talking about different aspects of life. And they had today it was yesterday it was an argument about what's going to happen in the 21st century, how our life is going to change, and will we go to Mars or will we be going to the moon and things like that. So they're very much up with what is happening or being made to be aware of what's happening in the world. So what do you think about the reaction to the girl and my insisting on them finding an ED ending? Have any of you had any experiences similar to that? I'm very careful when I'm teaching endings from now on.
No. So I'm just going to quickly butt in and say I'm very conscious of the time.
Yes, we've got 3 minutes. I've finished all the main thing. So I've just got my foreign language experiences. Oh, I did put down some activities that worked for mine. I think I've got emperor wrong. Emperor. I'll just correct my spelling error. There's a lovely game we play because our boss said that he was the emperor of the building. I was taught this game where you use an adjective. The emperor's cat is, and then you make them put an adjective, and you have to go through the whole alphabet. So you go from active right down to zany, is the one we got for the Z. X is very difficult. And then I changed it to the emperor's cat purrs, and they have to give me an adverb: purrs actively, badly, stupidly, and they have to learn the I-L-Y. For the ly adverbs. And I haven't been able to do a little bit of role play when I was in the classroom. They love idioms, but they find them very, very difficult. Would I Lie to You is a game on television, which I rather like. But I wrote one about myself, all the under 10 sentences about myself, and I think 7 were, about 6 were right and 4 were wrong. Then I get them to write one themselves about themselves, and they love doing that. And then I did one about Tasmania yesterday, and the girl had to write about China, and she wrote new things. And then I did something today with difficult spelling, and they've got to have the silent P or the silent letter in letters. They find that very difficult. And even words like February, they couldn't get right today. So they do like to have a spelling challenge. But the best that they love doing is Scrabble when I'm in a room. I taught them how to play Scrabble, and they could have competitions with each other doing that, work in pairs.
Great. All right. Well, thank you very much, Derris. So I'd just like to thank you for giving up your time and participating in our first forum of the year. Really appreciate that on behalf of TasTESOL.